You're listening to the CDL Files, brought to you by Driver's Legal Plan. Our show is hosted by Marilyn Surber and Brad Klepper, and we're really glad you joined us. Come along for the ride as we delve into some interesting corners of the trucking world. Let's open the CDL Files.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the CDL Files. I am so excited today. I'm kind of fangirling, if I'm being honest, about our next guest, who is the one and only Ellen Voie. We are going to talk about her new book today, From Dispatcher to Disruptor. She is the founder of the Women in Trucking Association, and I am honored to call her a friend. And so I am really excited to have you. Thank you, Ellen, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Marilyn, for having me on to talk about my book. I'm excited.
Yeah. I know. I am not quite finished with it. I was hoping to be finished with it by the time I had you on, but I have known you forever and I've learned, a lot from reading your book. I was like, wow, there's a lot to know and a lot of history there. So congratulations on the book. And it's not your first book, right? But what prompted you, to write this book?
Well, a lot of people kept saying, why don't you write a book? And, my initial reaction was, nobody wants to hear my story. And then I was actually contacted by the publisher and they said, hey, we found you on LinkedIn and you have an amazing story and, we'd love to work with you. So I checked out other publishers just because, doing due diligence, and went with Life Size Publishing, and they've been wonderful to work with and helped me through the whole process.
Okay, that's awesome. I mean, what a tremendous honor. I think it's such a service to the industry and, to the women, the next generation of women in the industry, I think to read your story, right, and learn the nuances and to appreciate. It's important to remember where we came from, right? We have a long way to go, but it's important to remember how far we've come, right? I mean, you founded Women in Trucking in 2007. The stats speak for themselves, right, on how many drivers are in the industry and all of those things. And I know I went to, my first conference was in 2014. We talked about, at CBTA, and that, even that 11 years, is as long as I've been, kind of out and about in trucking, and it's changed a lot. And so I think that it's really a service, kind of an education for everyone coming up of like, yes, we're doing all this work, but here's all the work that we've done, right?
There have been so many changes. And I think the historical aspect of the trucking industry, it was really important for me to include that, being in the industry before deregulation. Deregulation was right about 1980, and I earned my diploma in traffic and transportation management in 1979. So everything got disrupted in the industry when it deregulated. So it's really different now. And plus all the technology that is in use these days is so much different than when I first started.
Yeah. And so you used Disrupted. And so where did you get the inspiration for that title, Dispatcher to Disruptor?
It was actually the publisher. Actually, they had some options. And that one just struck me as, some people think the word disruptor could be a negative term, which it could be. But in this sense, it's a very positive term about disrupting this industry. And Marilyn, the trucking industry is very slow to respond. And it's slow to change, slow to adopt new technology, slow. And all of us, drivers resist change. We all resist change. I'll never forget when Qualcomm came out and drivers were like, I'm not going to let them track me, And then remember when automatics came out, like, I'm not driving an automatic.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, and ELOG, I remember, all of that too. When I was in the industry when the E-logs came out too, and in the automatic trucks. And to your point, it definitely where we are now is, and that doesn't seem like that long ago, right? It's like the recent history. We've come a long way in the recent history. So sounds like you had a great publisher. You picked the right one.
Yeah. They even took the website. They were so easy to work with. All the cover, the graphics and stuff like that. They helped me through all that.
That's awesome. And I do think, I think the history is important too. And I think when you're talking about, disruption as a positive thing, and because of our industry, it is so entrenched in history, right? And individual trucking companies mostly have this really rich history, right? That you talk about not just one man with one truck, right? But like one woman in one truck, right? And being able to talk about those things. And it takes disruption.
Mm.
I feel like I've never really worked in any other industry, so I don't have anything to compare it to. But I feel like to influence real change like you did in this industry, you have to disrupt things.
Well, and also you have to have a vision. You have to look at the world and say,
Hmm.
this could be a better place if we did this. And then the next part is to get people to buy into that vision and that mission. And that's part of being disruptor, is saying, well, I think we could have more ergonomically correct trucks. And then people are like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then suddenly a lot of people are helping you in that momentum to make things change. So part of being a disruptor is selling your ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think um we can forget about that sometimes, right? I think that's a great call out. Is even though it's good, it's a noble even, right? Or a great mission is like part of disruption is being able to get people on board and you have to sell them. Yeah, 100%. What a great reminder. I really appreciated also in your book, you talk a lot about your personal journey, and, you're raising your kids and how you did that. And, I know you've met my daughter. I don't know if you met my son too, but it is so personal. And I really appreciated that you opened up and talked about those struggles and and balancing that work and all of that. And, again, I've been friends with you and I had never heard that part of your story before. And I think that's great for other women and men coming up to see how, hear about that. But what are those key messages from the book that you hope resonate both professional and personally? Like, what is the message that you hope resonates with people the most?
Well, first of all, a lot of it relates to having credibility, and credibility means doing what you say you're going to do. And starting a nonprofit, people are like, "Why do we need something just for women?" And then you have to convince people that you're the right person to do it. So I already had some experience in the industry running a nonprofit when I was with Trucker Buddies, so I knew a lot of people, but so many would say, "Well, okay, it's a great idea, Ellen, but you have to deliver." So beyond the credibility, you have to make sure that you say what you're going to say. And you probably know Lana Batts. She was
Mhm.
in a truckload carriers, and she was the first person because she had run Truckload Carriers Association. And I said, Lana, I need your expertise and your insight. By having her on the board added credibility as well. So, it's the people you surround yourself with, the team who helps you make the change. And we all had to then work together to make people believe that we were going to say what we said we were going to do. And that was the hardest part about the first year, was um, coming up with data. I mean, there's a whole chapter on, wow, there
Mhm.
was no data back in 2007. So being able to produce that data added to the credibility, and also to be a resource was very
Yeah.
important. So I guess what I want people to take away is, make sure that your credibility is intact. Don't compromise that, and do what you say you're going to do. And then also, Marilyn, you know me. When I talk to people, I'll say, "What can I do for you? How can I help you?" And that also adds, to your circle of influence when you approach people with, "I want to support you." So, I mean, those are probably three of the bigger takeaways.
I know I wouldn't be here in the role where I am without the circle of influence that I was fortunate enough, to meet very early on in my career, and continue to build those networks. And so I think that is a resounding message. If anybody's reading your book or listening, is like, ask people for your help in this industry because they want to help you, to bring people up. And so, yeah, that's awesome. Good for you. The other thing is, we talked a little bit about women in trucking, and you're the founder and all of those things. But talk a little bit about what the industry was like back then and kind of what that turning point was for you, where you said, this is that important that I want to take this show on the road, right? And sell it to the industry.
So, they've been saying there's a driver shortage as long as I can remember, and that could be debatable. But regardless, when I worked at Schneider, my job was to figure out how to attract and retain non-traditional groups, and that included women. And the biggest change I've seen since I started Women in Trucking, and I would like to say that I was the catalyst for that change, is I wanted carriers to hire women because of what women bring to the company, like as drivers, being safer, often better with customers, better with paperwork. And as CEOs, the type of management, we're more collaborative and team oriented. And it's been proven that female managers have higher retention because of their, our maternal instincts, I'll say. But I wanted
Yeah.
companies to hire women for what they brought to the company. But at first it was, wow, we just ignored half the population, then they can go sit in our trucks, And so they didn't care about the gender. And
Yeah.
that was kind of frustrating. They were just like, wow, we haven't been thinking this through. And we could have more drivers. And so I would like to say, and I know this, that they now value what women bring, both in the boardroom and the cab of the truck and as technicians and that sort of thing. So that's the biggest change I've seen since 2007.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that makes the workplace better for everyone, right? We talk about that a lot on the advocacy front. We're out here advocating for things for women because women will advocate for it or for themselves in these cases, but it really makes the workplace better for everyone, not just for women, to your point. We can add, bringing something unique or different, to the table. I love that.
Well, how many golf
How
outings,
do you
Marilyn, how many
Oh,
golf
sorry,
outings
go
have
ahead.
you gone to where they have men's polo shirts? And when I
Right.
say, just to have uniforms that are cut for women, and I'll tell people, women will wear men's shirts. Women will
Mhm.
try to fit into a male populated environment. In fact, the early pioneers, the women, they didn't even want to be noticed. But now the
Right.
companies that are more gender diverse are the ones that say, how can we better accommodate you? And
Mhm.
listen to them, their female employees, and then really react on that feedback. So there, things are really changing.
Yeah. I feel like that is the biggest evolution I've seen, in my career too. I started in transportation in 2008. So right after you started the association, but it feels like, people are, openly saying like, how do we lean into the fact that we're women, right? And how do we lean into the fact that we want to hire women and and leverage their unique skills instead of trying to pretend everybody is just all the same, right?
Right.
And so you're right. That awareness itself has just changed. It's just changed a lot. So, um, what the industry has evolved a lot since 2007, and women in trucking has evolved a lot. How has the mission evolved since its start in 2007 to today?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I hope it hasn't.
Yeah.
The mission is threefold: to encourage the employment of women in the industry, to address obstacles, and to celebrate success. So that mission remains to this day, and I hope they don't change it. I hope they don't
Yeah.
question that, because the original board of directors really thought through this and said, what do we want to be known for? What do we want to focus on? And what do we want to spend our time and energy and money on? So
Mhm.
that mission I'm very proud of. And that has not changed.
Awesome. No, that's great. So, what is happening right now with women in trucking? Let's fast forward to the present. So, what's the most exciting things coming up right now for women in trucking? What's going on?
Well, the conference is coming up in November. So, and that's, and I write about the conference in the book because there were people on our board who were like, we're going to ruin our brand by if we flop, and the very first year we had 300 people, which is fine. But I mean, last year there
Mhm.
was 1,800 attendees, which makes
Yeah,
it
it's massive.
one of the largest truck
Mhm.
conferences, and it's 85% women. And so, I mean, you've
Yeah,
been there, you know what it's like. Is there energy in the room, and instead of, when you go to an ATA or TCA or a state association, it's like, oh wow, we've got more regulations, we insurance costs are up, driver issues, stuff like that. But at our conference, it's like, well, we can create change, and we're going to create change. There's just a very different, energy level in at the conference. So I think that's what brings people back.
absolutely. I was going to say energy. I've been like you, we've been to probably every conference in trucking, and there is a different energy at the Women in Trucking conference. I think Yeah, that's the exact right word. And maybe it's because it is 85%. Part of it, I think, is 85% women versus vice versa, and just the different energy that brings. But everybody is so upbeat and happy to just be there and be collaborating and forwarding the mission. And it's something special that you don't get it from every event. It's definitely a unique event. I would encourage everybody, if you haven't been, if you have been, but yeah, definitely go.
Well, and I have to say this, Marilyn, there's nothing there that men wouldn't learn from or appreciate or enjoy. But one of the things that I find fascinating about our conference is when we give out a participation award and Amazon has 85 employees there, who sends 85 employees to a conference? Well, obviously they see
Right.
the value in what they're learning because, I mean, we have keynote speakers, breakout sessions, but a lot of fun too.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's definitely different. So I encourage everybody to go. That's awesome. Ellen, tell us about Beyond the Driver's Seat.
So I think a lot of women don't look at the trucking industry and think that there's a place for them. And, I've talked to people, and my sister in law lives in Nebraska. And she was teaching, and I said, "Well, why don't you go to Werner? I'm sure they need, I'm sure they have classes." Never thought about
Mhm.
it. So I think that people look at the trucking industry and especially women and think there's not a place for me there, or I wouldn't be welcome there, or I wouldn't fit in. And so I'm really proud of the fact that we have our member of the month program, and it highlights not just drivers. It will highlight maybe someone who is an inspector at a scale, or someone who sells trucks, or different roles that they might have. And so I want other women to look at the members of the month and say, I hadn't thought about that. And I think that's very important because when they see someone who reminds them of themselves, maybe a female or that someone their age or whatever, and see that person doing that, it sets something off in their brain thinking, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And I'll give you a
Yep.
quick one. This was a driver though, but we've had drivers on many TV shows and in the media. But the one that really set the phones ringing was when Deb Labrie was on the Megyn Kelly show. And all she talked about was, I love what I do. And I get to see sunrises and sunsets. And, suddenly the phones were just lighting up and people were like, I hadn't thought about that. So we have to show people who are outside the industry that we are a very welcoming place and that they are wanted, especially women who might not picture themselves here. And then I have
Yeah.
to add this, Marilyn, but the Claire doll, the Girl Scout patch, the activity books,
Yeah.
all to talk about the trucking industry to young girls so that they
Mhm.
actually think about it. And when they look at a truck, they think that could be a female driver in there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So we know that we have to reach the next generation, because how are we going to get more women in the industry if we don't introduce them to the trucking industry when they're younger? So I found out that the Boy Scouts had a transportation patch and the Girl Scouts didn't. So we created it. We created the curriculum. We created an activity book that goes with it. It's called Scouting for Cookies. And I always wanted a truck driver doll. And I talk about that in the book, Claire. We couldn't get Barbie to do it, which I'm kind of glad because I'm not a huge Barbie fan, but but I
Yeah.
ended up meeting the president of Habit Toys. In fact, you can see Claire right over my shoulder right there. And it's a plush doll. And we've had so much fun with that. People would take pictures of Claire all over the North America and put them on the Where's Claire Facebook page. And so introducing young women to opportunities in trucking and make them aware of it is very important.
Absolutely. Well, where can we find the book if we want the book, and how can we get involved and learn more about Women in Trucking Association?
So the book is available on Amazon, and it comes in Kindle, paperback, and hardcover, and the audio version will be out very soon. Or they could go to my website. If they want an autographed copy, they would have to go to my website, ellenvoie.com, ELLENVOIE.com, and they can actually learn more about me. But to learn more about the Women in Trucking Association is just womenintrucking.org. And I do encourage people to go to the conference if they really want to jump into the trucking industry and learn about all different aspects of it.
Any closing thoughts before I ask my final question for you?
I would say that the typical reader could be somebody who wants to start a nonprofit, because I talk a lot about the challenges in starting a nonprofit. Somebody who maybe wants to learn more about the trucking industry and the background, and then somebody who's interested in non-traditional careers for women, because I talk a lot about some of the challenges women face in the trucking industry. So, I mean, there's a wide, array of potential readers out there. And so I hope that people see the value in all three of those subjects.
It's definitely easy to read, um, for sure. So thank you, Ellen. Thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for paving the way for so many of us that have come after you. We are trying to be disruptors. What is one piece of advice that you would give to the next generation of women who are coming into the trucking industry?
The one piece of advice I would say is don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it or that you shouldn't do it. Some young women, when they were told, well, girls don't drive trucks or girls don't do this, and don't listen to them. If you want to drive a truck, if you want to be a diesel tech, if you want to be the CEO of a company, don't let anyone tell you that you can't or you shouldn't, because you can and you should.
Amen. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of the CDL Files.
Thanks, Marilyn.